Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to be making some chicken nachos and we're going to be making a brookie because my oldest daughter has been asking for a brookie forever since I made her one at her birthday. So I was like, we'll make a brookie today. Okay, let's start. We're going to start by making the cookie base and then we'll make our brownie base for our brookie and then we'll assemble it. So let me grab, I want to use some softened butter here. So we're going to use 3/4 cup of softened butter or room temperature butter. It's just easier to whip up that way. And that just makes it a nice, easier creaming. So it will be 1.5 sticks. We'll also be using 3/4 cup in our brownie as well. There we go. And then I'm going to get my brown sugar and my regular sugar. So for my cookie base, we are going to use 3/4 cup of brown sugar. We're going to kind of firmly pack it down. This is a 1/2 cup, so I'll do this and then I'll fill it up halfway and do it. I find with my brown sugar cups, I use a different one that's easier to pack in than my normal cups that I use. So we're going to do 3/4 cups of brown sugar. And then we're going to add in a 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. And this is for the cookie dough base part of our brookie. If you're not familiar what a brookie is, it's essentially a half cookie, half brownie hybrid. It's delicious. So a 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. Slide these out of the way. And we're going to cream these two ingredients together. And then we'll add in our eggs, our baking soda, salt, and wrong side. Putting them in my little egg beating things just makes it a little easier. We're going to cream these together. And we just want to mix it until all of that butter is incorporated into the sugars for our cookie base. Go. And this is a little bit different. This isn't my traditional cookie dough recipe that I make when I'm making chocolate chip cookies. It's got to be slightly different because you are baking it with brownie mix. So it's just a slight variation of it. Okay. Last one. I'm going to turn it up just a smidge here and really get these creaming in here. You can see it's starting to form together. I'm just making sure I get any big chunks away. There we go. Okay. Now we are going to add in 1 egg plus 1 yolk. So we've got our first egg. I'm going to take those out. And then now we're going to add our yolk, which means we're going to get rid of our whites. If you want to keep your whites, you can. But I just never, ever. I used to always keep them and be like, I'm going to make something with them. And then I never did. So 1 egg plus 1 yolk. I'm actually save it there because we're going to need that later too. We're going to mix this in. Until all that yolk and those eggs are mixed in, and you'll have kind of like a creamy paste. Turn it up real high. And you could do this in a stand mixer if you wanted, but I find they're smaller batches, so they kind of work better in with a hand mixer. Okay. Now we're going to do our vanilla, our baking powder, and our salt. So, our baking soda, not baking powder. Let's do our vanilla first. We're going to do a tablespoon of vanilla. So it's going to have a good vanilla flavor to it, which will be great. This recipe will actually be using a tablespoon of vanilla in our brownie part too. So there's a lot of vanilla in this recipe, but it's delicious. These are my favorite brookies that I've made. Here we go. So we've got a tablespoon of vanilla in here. Now we're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we'll do a half a teaspoon of baking soda. Just going to break up that so I don't have a big chunk of salt in mine. There we go. So we've got our salt. And now we're going to do a half a teaspoon of baking soda. There we go. We'll mix those in. And then it'll be time for flour. So we've got it. I'm just making sure I get that mixed in really well so that I don't have to take the time to sift it. So I just want to make sure it gets pretty evenly dispersed. Okay. Let's grab our flour here. And now we're going to add in 2 cups of flour. And I'm using all-purpose flour. So we've got 1 and 2. We're going to mix them in. Then we'll put in our chocolate chips and we'll have our cookie base done. And I do have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. That's what we're going to be baking our brookie on. Now, a brookie cooks a lot like a brownie, so it takes a good amount of time to cook for it to be all the way done. I also like to do mine in a metal pan because I find metal brownies cook the best in a metal pan. There we go. We've got our good dough forming. Now I'm just gonna shake out my bits of cookie dough here. So we're gonna use these mixers for our brownies as well. Okay, and now you're gonna wanna add in about a cup or so of chocolate chips. I have a little bit left over in this bag, and then we're gonna be using part of this bag, and part of this bag will also be used in our brownies. So it's typically, you can use about 1 bag of chocolate chips, like a big bag of it. I like to do a little bit more because I like it a little bit chocolatier. So I've got some chocolate chunks here that we're going to also throw in. And the rest will be for our brownies. We're going to mix it together. And we've got our lovely base for our brookie. There we go. And the difference between this than a chocolate chip cookie is this is going to have more of a blondie base versus a like actual chocolate chip cookie base. So we've got that ready. Now we are going to get 1.5 cups or 3/4 of a cup of butter melting, which is 1.5 sticks. I always say those around backwards. So we're going to melt it up, and then we're going to add in 6 ounces of chocolate, which should be about the rest of my bag. I'm going to let them butter melt up a little bit first so that I have that nice kind of butter on the bottom, and then I don't have to worry about stirring it super fast all the time to prevent the chocolate from scalding. And then for our brownie base, as that's melting, we can get our rest of our ingredients in here. We are going to be using 3 eggs plus a yolk. So there's a lot of eggs in it, but that's pretty much the rising agent for this. So let's get our 3 eggs in and our yolk. But that extra yolk just gives it a nice kind of denser texture than using 4 full eggs. But I will say these are so good. Now I'm just going to use, let me crack it over here, just the yolk on this one. And the way I do it is I crack, and then I was taught as a little girl just to kind of bring it back and forth until you have all the whites off and you have it there. I feel like there's 1,000 different methods for separating, but that's the one I've always used. Let's see if our Yep, we've got a nice kind of base on our chocolate here, or our butter of it melted. So now I'm going to add in my chocolate. I'm using just the dark chocolate chunks, but you could use semi-sweet chocolate chips. I was using what I have. I have a wide variety of chips in my pantry. And I was, of course, I had no classic chocolate chips. I had triple chips, which are 3 different types. And then I had so many other variations. And I'm like, I just want chocolate chips. But we had chocolate chunks and a little bit of chocolate chips. There we go. So I'm going to just stir this constantly while it's melting. And you see how it's kind of melting pretty fast. Chocolate melts pretty fast, which is nice, but you have to keep an eye on it because it is really easy to scald, and burnt chocolate's just sad. Okay. So this is going to be the brownie base for our, this is the chocolate part for our brookies. And then we'll be making our chicken nachos here in a little bit. But with my brownie base, I do half melted chocolate and half cocoa powder. And that's going to give it just extra chocolatey flavor. And I really feel like the melted chocolate really just adds a little extra. Makes it, they're making them the best, like kind of fudgy brownies, like that chewy, delicious, not a cake brownie at all. There we go. And using butter over oil. Butter just is going to give you such a better end product. We are just about melted here. So I'm going to actually turn my heat off and let that residually sit there for a second. Let's get our sugar in here and ready. So for this one, we're going to use granulated sugar, and we're going to use 1.5 cups. So I'm going to add my sugar in. So I've got 1.5 cups. And I'm going to mix that up. Since this is all going to be in the same recipe, you can reuse your beaters because the brookies and the like the cookie part is going to be baked with the brownie part. So no need to go through, wash them up for this part. It's not going to change it if you've got a little bit of dough on there. And cream this together. So I've got the eggs and the sugar. Stand that up. Just give this one more stir. I have it off the heat, but it's still, that bottom of that pan will still hot, and I don't want it to burn. Now let's add in our vanilla. Again, we're going to use a tablespoon of vanilla here. And I know it thinks, oh, vanilla and brownies, vanilla goes in brownies. Trust me, it like makes the chocolate better. It makes that rich, unique flavor. You don't taste the vanilla, but it enhances that kind of chocolate flavor. And then we're going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. There we go. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Nope, not a half, 3/4 teaspoon. We'll do a half and then a 1/4 of it. I never had 3/4 on a thing. So here's half, and then we'll just slightly cover it. This needs a little bit more because there's more eggs in it. There's a little bit more, it kind of has a little bit more rise. It's not as dense as a cookie. So 3/4 a teaspoon of baking soda in there. Let's give this a mix up. And then we're going to add in our cocoa powder and our flour. And then last we will add in our chocolate and butter mixture. There we go. Make sure there's no big chunks. My husband told me the cookie dough was good. It is good. I don't feel like he should get to sample it yet. Okay, let's get our flour and a measuring cup. We need 3/4 a cup of cocoa powder and 3/4 a cup of flour. So cocoa powder takes part of the base of flour in brownies, which gives them that really chocolatey, delicious flavor. I was hoping, and whoops, perfect. I was like, please have 3/4 of cup in here because I didn't want to have to open another one just yet. And there was exactly 3/4 of a cup. Winning. Okay, so we got 3/4 of a cup of our cocoa powder. And I will tell you, if you've never worked with cocoa powder does resist mixing in the beginning, but it will incorporate and just takes a little bit of extra mixing. And then 3/4 of a cup of flour. A little bit more. We're going to mix this, and then we'll add in our chocolate, and then we'll be ready to get them in the pan and make and assemble our brookie, and then have it go in the oven. Start to cook. But you see how that the cocoa powder just likes to kind of stay on top of it for a little while, because it mixes in quite as easily as like flour does, that cocoa powder does. It's kind of similar to cinnamon. It just kind of like just sits on top of it. I'm going to do a really quick whisk up. And now we're going to add in our butter and our chocolate base to this. This is where that extra chocolatey goodness comes in. Making sure I get all of it out. And again, this was 3/4 of a cup of butter with 6 ounces of chocolate that we melted together. There we go. I'm going to keep this spoon because we're going to use this for mixing it in. And this is going to give it an even richer chocolatey flavor. Now, the cocoa powder that I used was just the good old Toll House cocoa powder. One thing that I have found throughout the years is do not get the special dark cocoa powder for brownies. Your brownies will be really, really bitter. You can use dark chocolate in it, but the cocoa powder, it needs to be just like a traditional, like Dutch processed, not super dark, because super dark means it's going to be really bitter. And I love dark chocolate, but I find that they're even too dark for me when I go there. So I just love this good old, it's Nestle Toll House. Sometimes I buy the Ghirardelli ones. There. So here is our delicious brownie base for our brookie. Just going to scoop around. Lovely. Okay, let's assemble the brookie. Now, I like to use a metal pan when baking brownies because I feel like the heat conducts much better in it and you get that nice chewy outer edge. But you want to coat it down really nice with some oil or grease it with your butter packets that you have left over and really spray it down. That way it will slide out of your pan much better. You could line it with parchment paper, but I always find that doesn't give you as chewy of a brownie end. And then we're going to pour our brownie mix on first. And that's as important because the cookie dough is much denser. And so you take the chunks of the cookie dough and you kind of break it up and you put it in there and then the brownie comes around it. But if you were to put the cookie in first, it just doesn't bake up well. That cookie needs more of that upper heat. There we go. Now, do my best scraping to get as much of this out. My kids are always like, oh, you don't have to get it all out if you don't need to. They love to be my taste testers and the bowl cleaners at the very end. Okay, now we've got our cookie base. The best way to do this is with your hands because you want to break it up to where you're not having super thick pieces of the cookie. And we're just breaking it up. And you're going to literally kind of do a nice even coverage over the whole brownie and then go back over and fill in any kind of gaps or whatnot. But try to get it first as evenly over the top. And as you see, the cookie is sinking into the brownie, and that's where that brownie mix will bake up around it. It has, it's much more viscous than the cookie dough. Here we go. And these, I will say, these are the best brookies. I've gone through several recipes throughout the years, and I tweaked it to being this recipe. Sometimes you're like, oh, I need a little bit more butter or a little bit more chocolate. This has been like my final resting place on it. I'm like, nothing else I need to do to tweak it. Here we go. And I remember I used to make my brownies with oil because growing up, brownies, I felt like oil was always used. Baking mixes, you always oil. And then I can't remember when I made the switch over to melted butter. So much better. And you can use them in the same, ratio, melted butter to oil. You don't have to add any more or less. There we go. Almost have it all. And I know it's going to look like it's completely covered over. This top layer will kind of form into like a cookie, but you'll have a good brownie on the bottom. Brownie takes the heat a lot better from underneath, and the cookie takes the heat a lot better from the top. So it kind of is like turns out just perfect. I remember we made these for my daughters. She does not like cake, and she wanted Brookie's and ice cream for her birthday. And these didn't even last a day in our house. There we go. Give it a little kind of gentle tap down. As that butter melts, all that will form into a kind of like one big cookie on top. Okay, let's go pop these in the oven. And there. And these need about 40 minutes to cook. So they may not get done during the stream, but we'll pop them out and we can look at them and see. I have it preheated to 350. And I'm going to set my timer for 40 minutes, but we'll check them and then we'll always put a little short on later. But brownies are one of those things that they take forever to cook, but they're delicious. And the biggest thing with brownies is when you're cooking or brookies, you're gonna feel like they're underdone. Take them out because brownies continue to cook after you take them out of the oven and they firm up. Let's get this wiped up, and then we're gonna start working on our chicken nachos. So I have some rotisserie chicken. Earlier this week, we made chicken salad sandwiches, and I used up about half of my rotisserie chicken. So we're going to use the other half today for our chicken, like a nachos for it. Forgot to put out my olive oil. Let me grab that real quick. Heat this up. I'm going to kind of chop up a few tomatoes in here and a little bit of onions. Actually, let's start. I'm going to do my onions first. We're going to start sauteing them up to go on top of our nachos. I'm like sitting there. I'm like, what bits and pieces do I want to do first? So we're going to saute the onions up. That way we can kind of cook the chicken and the residual like flavors of it. So I'm going to leave a little bit of onion right here to the side that we're going to put in with our chicken. And the rest are going to be kind of like fajita veggies that we have, on top of the nachos. Because my favorite when you go to a restaurant is you get those fajita nachos. I love nachos. And so I love to have the little veggies on it.
You have a question about the Brookie? The chocolate chip cookies and brownie, is that box mix or is it from scratch?
From scratch. So we will post the link to this video on our page. So if you want to recreate that recipe at home, you can go and rewatch it and cook along with it. So that link will be posted afterward.
And the recipe card later.
Yes, and a recipe card later. I will get to making this recipe card because this is, I sit there and I have it written down and it's like a picture, a snapshot of it, of my like chalkboard writing of my recipe. And I'm like, I need to put this in a recipe card. So I've got to, I'll have it up and for everyone. But it is such a good recipe. And it's like, that's why I said the last time I made these, they were like, these are the best ever. And I'm like, I'm keeping this. I'm not changing them at all. Okay, we're gonna get my onions kind of sauteing up here. And then I've got 2 crazy long peppers. These are sweet peppers. They're not spicy. They just have them at Costco. And I have a whole pack of them. And I'm like, what am I gonna do with these peppers? They just look good. And of course, anytime something looks good, I'm like, gotta buy it. That's why I say, I'm like, I got to get better at it. But when I go grocery shopping, I rarely am like, I'm going to cook this, this, and this week. I'm like, ooh, this looks nice. This looks good. This is in season. Let's grab that. These are good prices. And then I end up buying a bunch of ingredients, and then I have to figure out what to make with them when I get home. Which is always like me figuring out, oh, what should I do today? And, oh, what do I need to use up in my fridge? So we're gonna just kind of de-seeding this. One thing about sweet peppers is really nice is they don't really have much de-seeding and de-bearding that you have to do. They're not spicy. They're nice and sweet. And I'm just gonna cut them in force, and then we'll make some nice strips. So kind of like a fajita veggie for it. I like them a little bit, sweet peppers a little bit better than bell peppers because they're not quite as bitter. Even like a red, these sweet peppers will be more sweet than a red and yellow bell pepper. So I think their just flavors are just more mild and nicer. I'm excited because when I checked on my garden, I have a couple peppers growing. So hopefully no squirrels steal them or rabbits. I remember one year I attempted to grow strawberries, and I like came up and I was like, oh, I have like these. I had like, I think it was like a half, maybe a dozen or so like perfect strawberries coming in. And I'm like, oh, they just need like one more day and then they'll be perfect. The very next day, every single one of them had been stolen, and there you could see bites around them. And I even put up a plastic owl to try to scare the critters away. But they love to steal stuff in our garden. It's always fun because we'll like be driving or walk out into our driveway, and there's like a half-eaten tomato in the driveway from some animal.
I don't think rabbits would be a problem.
No, not with our cats, or our dogs. But it's the squirrels and some of the birds. They just steal, and I'm like, I'm happy for you to take one or two, but when you take all of them, when you're like tomato pops. I never like to eat the tomato that pops. And so those are the ones I kind of chuck for the animals. And that happens when it rains a lot and they get an influx of water, then they'll pop. Or if you are like me and don't water your plants enough, and then you give them a really big water, and then they go, woo, really big. Okay, we got our onion sauteing here. I'm not going to super cook my onions up. I'm just going to do a nice kind of simple, light kind of hot sear on them, saute on them, because they're going to be going into the oven when we do the kind of the cheese melt base for our nachos. And so lost the pepper. So when we do the cheese melt, like put in there, I'll put my peppers, my onions, and my chicken in there, and then we'll melt the cheese, and then we'll top it with our salsas that we're going to be making. We're going to make guacamole, a tomato salsa, and corn salsa to go on top of our nachos, because you got to make nachos, you got to jazz them up. Okay. I'm going to let these saute for just a second. And while we're doing that, we can kind of, let me actually just grab another pan out. We'll start on our chicken. I'm going to cut up a few tomatoes for our chicken just to get a little bit of that tomato juice in there, and an onion, and we'll let these kind of start to saute. I'm just doing a really simple taco seasoning on it. Sometimes I make more of a tomato-based sauce, like a nice kind of Mexican flavored tomato-based sauce for this. But today I'm keeping it extra simple. Just mince these onions up nice and small so that they're not really prominent with our shredded chicken, but we'll get those nice flavors. And then I'm just going to quarter some of these tomatoes up for it. And the tomatoes will add a nice little bit of juice and liquid to our rotisserie shredded chicken. That's one thing. I love Costco's rotisserie shredded chicken. It's such a good deal, and it makes meal prep really easy if you want to have quicker meals or do all the work. Because I will say, one of my least favorite things is shredding a chicken because you gotta wait till it cools. It's just a time consuming thing. Like if you're making chicken noodle soup or you roast it. I'm gonna add in a little bit of olive oil here. Got my burner on about, I'm gonna do a 7. I'm gonna pop these onions in real quick. Let them kind of heat up for just a second. And then this is the other half of my rotisserie chicken. I'm gonna shred it up a little bit because sometimes you get like huge pieces of chicken and it is like, can't eat it. It's like massive. So just kind of get in there. You could chop it up, but I find if you just tear it with your hands, the chicken is more natural, like kind of, it breaks up more naturally. And then you don't have like little teeny bits of chicken. But this is, I know you can get, rotisserie chicken anywhere, but Costco has it in like their, I think, 2.5-pound packs. And I didn't even realize it existed at Costco for a while because it's just in a slightly different area. But it's great. I use this for like chicken pot pies, like chicken flautas, chicken tacos, nachos, chicken salad. It can be used in a lot of different things. They do the work for you. They do most of the shredding. Okay. I think this is just about good. I want us to be able to eat our nachos without pulling up half a chicken. I think a dog's going to get lucky in a little bit and get a piece of chicken. Okay, let me wash my hands real quick. Beautiful. I've got that nice little fajita sear on them or saute on them. That's just what I want. But now I'm going to remove them because I want the rest of the softening up of them in the oven. If I cook them to where I want them now, then they'll get mushy in the oven. So we'll just slide this over. Actually, we'll turn this off and we'll do it over here. I don't know if it's because of like I'm right-handed or I like to cook in certain spots in my kitchen and I kind of like use certain burners over it, but I like to cook on this burner over this burner. Unless I'm doing something over, it's just weird. I like to have my kitchen set up.
So you have a question? Do you ever make your own chips?
I have made my own chips before and they're delicious. I love homemade chips. But I have, we're a family of 7 and that's a lot of frying to do. But I love homemade flour chips. I mean, corn chips are always good, but there's something about a flour tortilla chip I love. It's just like when you get like those, taco salads and the fried flour shells. Love it. And I actually have a fry daddy that I used to fry. And I used to do a lot of like fried dinners when I was like in my early 20s. And I'm like, I haven't gotten it out, but because it wastes so much oil. And whenever I do it, I'm like, we got to eat fried food for a week. But fried, my own tortilla chips, like I do that, and they're delicious. Okay.
You got a question with someone? Did you go live yesterday?
I did not go live yesterday. Yesterday, we played hooky. We went to Holiday World, to the amusement park there, and had a blast. And we did get caught in a bit of rain, but it worked out in our half because we got free tickets to come back. And we still got we did most of the rides in the park. So it was a win. There was nobody there. And I was like, all the kids were like super excited that we get to come back. And I'm like, maybe like the second week of school starts up, we'll go back on the weekend. So I put a little bit of my taco seasoning in here. I started with probably about a teaspoon. I'm just letting that kind of heat up first. I'm going to add a little bit more later. but I do like some of those spices to heat up, and they brings up the flavor a bit more. Okay, let's get this chicken in. But no, yesterday was a very long day. My oldest daughter had like soccer in the morning, so we were up with her at like 7, and then we left after her soccer practice and drove to Holiday World, which is about a 2.5 hour drive. Got there, played some, big rainstorm, and hopped over. But then we didn't get back until like 10 o'clock at night. It was a full day. Everybody was like so exhausted. We had to stop at Buc-ee's too on our way back because we just love Buc-ee's. So it was a full day yesterday, but I can't wait to go back. Okay, we're going to add a little bit more of our taco seasoning here. Now with nachos, you don't want to have your chicken be too wet. So like a lot of times when I do, if I do like chicken tacos, I will do more of like a stewed sauce with it. But if your chicken is super wet in nachos, it's going to make your chips soggy. Here we go. Losing a little bit. We're going to let it kind of heat up. I've got it on about a 4. And so I'm really just doing kind of a dry bit of it. If you buy the packets of taco seasoning at home, they're like, put the tacos in and then add a little bit of water, let it cook out. I'm not going to add any water. We had the tomato juices that will add a little bit of liquid to it, but I want it to be more of a dry spice on my chicken. And there we go. And just going to keep it low there for just a second. Let me slide this out of the way because we're going to start kind of assembling our first base to go in the oven and melt up while we prep our dips. So if you're making nachos, highly recommend you lay parchment paper down, because if you ever bake anything with cheese on a dish, it's very hard to come up. We're just using some good old Tostitos. I feel like these were the only tortilla chips back in the early 90s, and they're just a classic. We're going to do our first layer here. We'll save a little bit for those who want just with the guacamole. Now I'm going to kind of try to face them up as much as possible. And you can use any ones. These are the scoops. Any tortilla chip works well. So we're making sure that every scoop gets filled with deliciousness. Now my trick with nachos is I like to do 2 layers of cheese. So I do a kind of a layer, then I'll add my meats and my veggies on there, and then we'll do a second layer on top. I'm just using sharp cheddar because we love cheddar, but you could use Kobe, Monterey Jack, Pepper Jack, anything you want. It works. We're just going to do a nice little sprinkle over, trying to make sure I hit every single one. And this is going to ensure that you get cheese on every single chip versus, when you get nachos and everything's on the top and then you get to the bottom of your nachos and there's no cheese on it. There we go. So we've got our first round, and then I'm going to take my chicken here. And putting the hot ingredients on it is going to allow the cheese to also melt up some. So I'm just going to kind of drop it all the way around. And I don't want any spot to be too heavy with chicken, because I find if you pile something too high, then the chips can get soggy underneath it. So go spread out further versus making more pile. Which is why I'm using, this is a really big baking sheet. It's a 1.5 sheets. So it fits my entire oven, which is wonderful when you're a big family or you have something that needs a lot of space. Like when you do home fries, you want a lot of space so they're not touching. This is it's great for nachos too. which I feel like nachos are such an easy meal that you can throw together with like simple ingredients. I'm going to bouge it up today with some good salsas and whatnot, but it is simple. Now, only some of us like peppers and onions, so I'm only going to do peppers and onions on a portion of it, and I'll save some to be added on the top because last time I was told I put too many peppers and onions over the whole thing. So I'm just going to do a small sliver of it because only a few of us like peppers and onions, which I think they're crazy. There we go. So this is for the people, the sane people that like it. Extra veggies. And honestly, sauteed zucchini works great on this as well. Okay. And now we're just going to do our second layer of cheese. And I do this so that you get cheese on that top part. And again, you're not doing it super heavy, another light layer because you've got that first layer that's going to give you that cheese underneath. There we go. Okay, we're going to go pop these in the oven. Now, if I was cooking nachos just by myself, I would put them in the air fryer or convection bake setting at 425 or 450. But because we're cooking them under our brownies, they're going to just have to cook a little bit longer. But that's why I did a dry chicken instead of a wet chicken. But here you can see, oh no, my oven got turned off. I did this one time before. No worries. We can bake it up here. Why did it go off? It's okay. Well, our brookies will definitely not be done. I did this once when I made muffins like a month and a half ago, and I didn't check. I've been checking every single day. So it will just take a little bit longer for those to cook up, but you'll still be able to see them halfway, and we'll put a short on there. But we do have our, we're going to make our guacamole and our tomato salsa and everything like that. So our nachos will definitely get done here in perfect timing. Let's get I need 2 bowls, tomato. I already got one for corn salsa. And we're going to start kind of prepping up our vegetables. So if you've ever had the chipotle corn salsa, we're going to do that. It's my favorite salsa. I absolutely love it. So let's start prepping up our onions for this. Now my guacamole, we're doing really, sometimes you can call it a avocado mash, but it's super simple. Here we go. I bet you I must have just cleared it off or something. There we go. We're going to mince these up. And I'm going to add this to our corn salsa and to our regular salsa that we're making, our tomato salsa or Pico De Gallo. You might need a little bit more, but let's see. And this is what we're going to top on top of our nachos when you come out, so you get all that stuff. You're going to top it.
You have a comment? Jen says she's been using your recipe for your simple guac and loves it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. It is very simple and very basic, but it is delicious. We're just going to use on there. It's just avocados, garlic salt, and fresh lime juice. But it is, I will say, it is, everyone I make it for just loves it. And I think what's so great about it is the simplicity in it, that it isn't like so many, different ingredients. A lot of people love to put, tomatoes, peppers, onions in it. But I just keep mine simple. Let the avocados shine. And, the nice thing is if you have leftovers, you can use it for avocado toast the next day. Or Teddy, most of the time, whenever we have guac, he's like, can I have avocado toast? And I'm like, sure, I'll toast it up and we can have some avocado toast too. Now let's mince up. I just like to make my onions nice and small. For salsas, or you want to use a red onion, or you can use white onions. I prefer red onions because they're a bit sweeter and not as sharp, but white onions are great for salsas. I would avoid a yellow onion or Valdalia or sweet onions. They're too pungent. Okay. And we're going to use a little bit of green onions. Again, they're much more mild, but delicious. We'll slice them up. We're going to add them in there. And the green onions, I just think, add another level of complexity. They're very different tasting than a red onion, but they hit you in a different area, which I think just complements nachos so well, and just dips in general. So we'll split these between. And then I have our cilantro.
Do you have a question? Your opinion on green onions versus scallions?
So they're very, very similar, like green onions, scallions, chives, spring onions. They're all really in the same family. They just have like different widths. I find some have like chives has a much more, they're not as pungent in flavor, but you got a really strong, like kind of oniony, but not with that pungent, I don't think. I kind of love onions all together, so I like them all. And they're very versatile that you can kind of use them all back and forth. In the sense, if you're replacing a recipe that needs chives, then you just use the greener part of it, of the onion. But I like them all, and I think they're pretty versatile in how you use them. Here is the cilantro. I find this is a spice that you either love or you hate. I love, my husband hates.
You have a question? When you buy avocados, do they go on the counter or the fridge?
So when I buy avocados, they start on the counter and then they end up in the fridge, because most of the time you get those avocados and they're rock hard from the store. If you put them in the fridge, they'll never ripen up. They go from like good to bad, or they get like a pasty texture to it. So I wait until they're ready on the counter, where they've got a soft little touch to them, where you can kind of push them. And if you pushed really hard, you could, make a good dent. That's when I know that they are ready to use. And then I pop them in the fridge. And then that buys you about a week of time before you really need to use them up. So that's kind of my method of doing it. I'm going to put my fresh cilantro. I put about a teaspoon in each one. And then my one last, I need to grab a pepper. Looks like I used all my peppers there. I forgot to save a little bit, but I always have peppers. Grab just want a few because they add a crunch to the Pico De Gallo that is nice. It breaks it up. So I just got 2 little baby sweet peppers, or those snacking peppers. I said that's something that's always in my fridge. Peppers are always there. I'm going to dice these up, and I'm going to add this to the Pico de Gallo. And I don't like to do too many in it. If you like spice, you could do a jalapeno or poblano, anything that you want. I'm a spice baby. But if you had a love of spices, you could definitely put it in here. I like it mild. So we've got the base to this. Now we are going to do tomatoes in here. Then I'll put my avocados in, and then we'll do our lime juices, and we'll season them up. So I'm using just cherry tomatoes today because I have used up, but I have a lot of cherry or grape or whatever you want to call them. They're interchangeable. I think these are grape ones because they're slightly smaller. But I'm just going to kind of quad slice them into 4, pieces, and use them for my salsa. But also you could use aroma tomato, vine ripe tomato, any really thing. These are going to have a stronger tomato flavor in it because they're, cherry tomatoes are fairly potent. I'm really waiting for my tomatoes to come in. I've got one ready, and then I've got a bunch of green ones like cherry tomatoes ready, but none of my big tomatoes are coming in. And I really want to, like today when I was driving my older daughter's soccer practice, and I peeked over at my neighbor's garden there, and they've got like 20 tomatoes, and I'm like, oh, they look so good. And she's like growing, I think, like an heirloom variety. She's got like the yellows and the purples, and I was like, oh, these tomatoes look so much better than mine. Okay, we're almost done here. You could also, do a quick and like a food processor with the tomatoes if you want. I prefer for my pico, I like more like where you notice the tomatoes a bit more versus if you kind of do it in a processor, they get more shredded. Okay, let's get our avocados here. I'm going to cut them down. See, and this is my method. You wait till they're ripe, you pop them in the fridge, because I also love my guacamole to be made with nice and cold avocados versus making your guacamole and then chilling it. I like it to be ready right away. I'm always happy when I have like they all turn out perfect. Sometimes you have an avocado that somebody dropped and you don't know it, and then when an avocado gets dropped, it bruises and it's just awful. Let's grab my spoon here. I'm going to scoop these guys out. Now, for the best way to keep your guacamole green isn't like put the skins on or leave the pits in. Use fresh lime juice, and then when you're ready to store it, you take like cling wrap or saran wrap and you push it over the top of your guacamole until there's no air that can touch it. And because it's the oxygen that turns it brown. If you do that, you can pop it in the fridge. It should be bright green the next day without it getting brown. There we go. Pop it out. And then one more. So we've got our avocados here. Wash my hands real quick. And I'm going to sneak a peek real quick at my nachos. Okay. Still working on it because I was like, the heat, since we were starting, they'll need like 2 more minutes, then we'll be ready, which is perfect timing. Okay. For our salsas, we're going to squeeze a half a lime over my Pico De Gallo, half a lime over my corn salsa, and my guacamole is going to get a whole lime. Like I said, lots of fresh lime juice. It's going to make the difference. It's going to keep it green. It's going to enhance those flavors. And then I'm going to get my garlic salt, and we will season these guys up. If your lime isn't super juicy, then you might need to use more. These are quite juicy. When I'm picking out my limes at the store, I find the limes that I feel like they have a thinner skin. Thinner skin means they're not going to absorb as much of the natural moisture inside, which will keep them much better. Let me grab my garlic salt. It's those thick ones, like if you get a lemon or anything with the thick rinds, or even citrus fruits in general, that thick rind is going to mean your fruit's not going to be as juicy. Okay. Imagine that. Another garlic salt. This is my favorite spice. I use it in everything. So we'll do a little sprinkle over the tomatoes, a little sprinkle over the corn. Your guacamole is going to use a bit more because that it has a bit more body to it. So I use about a teaspoon and a half in my guacamole, but I always taste it. And I let my Evie taste it, and she always tells me, you need more salt. And I'm like, there's plenty of salt in it. Let's bring these here. A fork is going to be your best friend for mashing.
You got a comment that they like how you always have garlic salt and stuff.
I do. I actually have 2 more containers in there at various levels. I'm always just grabbing some. But it is sometimes a really sad day when I run out because I think I have a backup and I don't. And then I'm like, my food just doesn't taste right. It's missing the component. And garlic powder and salt just doesn't do it. it doesn't make the right. Garlic powder doesn't have the right consistency as garlic salt. So garlic salt, it does make everything so much better. Okay. I use the fork to mash it the best. It works better than a spoon. You can do like a mortar and pestle if you want. But the fork, I think, gives you a creamy enough guacamole with a little bit of chunk. Because I don't like my guacamole super smooth. I want it to have a little bit of texture, but I don't want to have like a whole huge piece of avocado in there. Like enough to handle my chip well. And that's it. Super simple there. For my corn salsa, we're just going to stir this guy up. That's just cilantro, corn, red onion, green onions, and garlic, salt, and lime juice. And then our Pico De Gallo, again, super simple. We've got our tomatoes, cilantro, red onion, green onions, and peppers. Now, if you want a little bit of heat and fresh lime juice, a little bit of heat, you add a little bit of jalapenos to that. Okay, let's go grab our nachos out of the oven, and because they're ready, we can sneak a peek. I think our brookies will be done in like 10 or so minutes. They're getting there, although they look actually pretty close. Maybe by the time we've got everything all dressed up, we'll be ready. But look at our nachos here. You see how all of that cheese is nice and gooey and melted? But because we spread our chips out and we layered them, the chips should still be nice and crunchy. Okay, slide these over here so I have more area. And then we are going to assemble or put our things. Now, I'm going to show you how I make my nachos. Theirs is a lot less. Theirs isn't as nice and pretty and delicious as mine. So I'm going to start out with my Pico De Gallo, kind of sprinkle it all here, spread it out. They, of course, Evie will eat my tomatoes with me, but nobody else will really eat the tomatoes with me. Then I'm going to do copious amounts of corn salsa because corn salsa is where it's at. It's so delicious. So we've got our corn salsa over, and then we're going to go through, we're going to add dollops of our guacamole because you need that to kind of dip your chips in. So we've got our guacamole, and then I'm going to come through with my sour cream because you've got to have sour cream on nachos. So we're going to have a nice dollop of our sour cream, and that is how you serve chicken nachos with our fajita veggies. We've got our seasoned chicken, our corn salsa, our Pico De Gallo, our guacamole, sour cream, cheddar cheese for a really easy oven but restaurant quality nachos. And then we have the plain Jane for the kids. They'll put sour cream and guacamole on there, but vegetables they're like, you're crazy, Mom.
You have a question. Is it fresh corn or canned corn or frozen?
Frozen corn. I think you could use canned corn, but canned corn I find is a bit too sweet. So I like to use frozen corn that I fill up with some water, let it soak until it's no longer frozen, drain it out, and I feel like it has the perfect amount. Fresh corn, you would have to do a blanching on it to work, and canned is just sometimes a bit too sweet. But we can go check out our brookies because they actually looked pretty much done, and we can pull them out. It's always I've done this once before where I turned off the oven when I was making nectarine muffins. I still remember that, but they still turned out. So we've got it here. I can actually just kind of tell by the look of the cookies how it's merged together. But here is our beautiful brookie. You can see the brownie is popping up around the sides and the edges. Now, just like with a brownie, you can't cut into your brookie until it needs to cool for about 15 minutes because that butter base has to solidify. Otherwise, you're going to have more of a gluey things. But you can just see we've got like a nice little brownie crust over here. We've got the cookie coming up. It's going to be absolutely delicious once it chills. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes, you can just go search for what we cook for, and you can re-watch it again and cook along with us at home. We do offer recipe cards occasionally, but most of the time our recipe cards are exclusive for our members. But sometimes we throw out a freebie there. But the best way to recreate it is to watch those videos. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront where I have all the cooking gear that I use. I've got my big sheet and a halves there by Nordic Ware. I've got my hex clad, all the different cooking gadgets, knives, stuff that I use. I have in there